Coming up is a build video for the Tyro99 quadcopter racing drone kit. It basically comes with everything you see here. It comes with the motors, the propellers, the 4-in-1 ESC, the flyboard, the frame itself. Comes with a VTX up on top, the VTX antenna, the camera. Everything you need to make this thing fly is included except for the receiver, the battery, the transmitter, and your own goggles. But the nice thing about buying this kit is it has everything you need in it. So the video itself is a pretty long, boring video, but it is hopefully detailed enough that it will help you assemble your own. But before we get started on the build video, let's get a little fly footage and see how this flies so you can know what you're getting. So overall, this thing is a lot of fun to fly. And anyway, get ready for the build video. It's long and boring. Hopefully it helps you out if you're trying to build one yourself. Thanks for watching. With the Tyro99 kit, this is what you get. Everything comes in this nice box, ready to go. You don't have to buy anything else except for a receiver for your particular transmitter. In this case, I have an XM Plus that I'm going to be using. And the reason I got this one is because it's small and hopefully it'll fit inside the frame. Because I had the purple 215 frame, which has the same style of pieces here for the top. And it was a little tight inside. Well, this is what comes inside. Sheet of stickers and a whole bunch of other stuff. So I'm going to get this stuff laid out and we'll see what it comes with and we'll get this build started. So this is cool. It has all the parts you need in here, ready to go. All you have to do is just assemble it. So actually I'm kind of excited about this. I haven't had a kit like this since the X210, but even that one didn't come with the VTX or the camera, and it came in at about 120 bucks, where this one's right around 100. And adding the camera and stuff to it later was okay. It was just, you know, something else you had to add. Now on this kit, I don't think that this camera, this Eachine camera, is probably the best camera that you can get for this, but it should be fine to start with. And also upgrading your camera later is not too big of a deal. Also, I have a couple other lenses that I'm gonna see if I can find, and if I can, I'll put them on here and see if that makes any difference on how well this can see. Anyway, so the first thing we want to start to do is to start attaching the motors out here to the arms. And that way we can get this whole build started. And also, just so you know, this is going to be a tight build with this style of aluminum pieces up on top, because there's not a lot of stackable space inside here. So it's not going to be impossible. It's just going to be, you just have to be pay attention to how you're assembling things. And the reason that this VTX is probably sitting up on top of everything is because there's so little room inside the frame, especially for something this large. But I think it'll be fine, and it'll probably work well in the end. The other big difference between this kit and the X210 is that the X210 could only support up to a 4S battery, whereas this one supports up to a 5S battery. And it has a little bit slower kV motors. I think these were, what are they? 2150 kV motors. So they're a little bit slower than the 2600 kV motors that I used in the X210, but the advantage that these have is that they can run on 5S batteries. So and it can probably run on 4S and 3S. I'll try all those too, and we'll see how it does. The bag of screws comes with a lot of different sizes, and they did not try to make this easy for you. It has the nylon spacers here, the nylon nuts, has these little small screws, which I would assume are for like the camera. Has some M3 lock nuts here, and then it has the these are all M3 size screws, and these are 4 millimeters, 6 millimeters, 8 millimeters, 12, 14, and 18 millimeters. So it's going to be interesting to try to figure out where all these different size screws go, but it shouldn't be too bad, and we'll figure it out. Each of the arms have 3 holes for the motors to mount to. So they didn't put the 4th one on here, probably just trying to be cool. So what we're going to do is we're going to build this with the 3rd motor hole here pointing to the back, and then on the front it's going to point to the front like this. You could run them like this if you wanted with them coming out to the side, but I'm going to put them like this. And so when you put these motors on, you have 2 of them that are clockwise and 2 that are counterclockwise, and the color of the lock nut up here on top determines which one it is. But the silver one does a righty-tighty, so this one is the clockwise motor, and we're going to put the clockwise motors over on the back right and the front left, and then the ones with the black lock nut are going to go on the front right and back left, just like this. And it's best to lay it out that way you know for sure you're mounting this on the correct side and you don't have to go back and correct it later. So to put these on, I'm going to be using the M8 screws, and I'm going to put just a drip of the thread locker on the end of this to help hold it into the motor so that it doesn't tend to come unslipped or unscrewed or anything during the flight. So I'm just going to put just a drip on there, just enough that it gets wet, and then mount it up onto this motor. Another thing, if you don't have a driver like this, go ahead and buy one. If you're using the old standard hex wrenches or the Allen wrenches like this, you are not doing yourself any favors. If you use these, the chances of stripping out the head on these hex screws is going to go down drastically, and this is just so much faster. So anyway, we'll go ahead and get this put on. Like I said, this is an M8 screw with just a little bit of thread locker on here. I'm going to run it through here and get it connected up. Now, the one thing you don't want to do, don't cut these motor wires. These are not easy to solder motor wires, but they should already be the right length. So, alright, anyway, I got this one finished. Go ahead and do the same thing to the other 3. To give the arms a little bit more finished look, we're going to use this included shrink wrap with it. We're going to slide it over top of the wires and right over top of the arm. And this is going to help protect the quad, or the ESC wire, or the motor wires here, from prop strikes. And when you hit the ground, sometimes it'll bend your props, and it'll go down and just smack onto the wires and cut them, and then you're kind of stuck, you know, not being able to fly. So we're going to slide this all the way down as far as we can. Hopefully it'll go on all the way there. Slid on all the way. And you want to slide it all the way up to the motor like this. It's going to shrink down and move out of the way of the motor, so it'll be fine. But we're going to get all up here, and then you want to shrink wrap it, and that will help, like I said, protect these wires from prop strikes. So there it is. It came out pretty nice. You want to try to get your motor wires to run flat if you can. That way it just makes it look all a little better. So, alright, now to get the arms on. With all 4 motors attached, the next thing to start to work on is building the frame. This goes on the bottom, and these 14mm screws will go up through the middle holes like this, and then we'll put the arm on, and the arm will go in the middle hole like that, and then they'll screw into this top plate here. They screw in from this side through the carbon fiber into that little nut, and that will help hold it tight. And all 3 of these, if you're using the right screw, it should just barely clear, or maybe just come right up to the top of this nut. If it's sticking out past that nut, you got the wrong screw. So I used the 14mm screws in the middle and the 16mm screws out here on the edge. And this should be good to go. Alright, now the next thing we're going to do is use more of the 14mm screws. They're going to slide up through the arm here. And they should stick out about that much. Ooh, there we go. About that much, and that's where the flight controller is going to connect to. Now the flight controller, the back of it is where the capacitor is, and the front of it is obviously over there. But the capacitor is there to help regulate the voltage going into the speed controller, so that it kind of stays more of the same voltage instead of taking voltage spikes or voltage drops. The capacitor helps a lot with that. Okay, now at this point it doesn't really matter which is the front. It can be this side or this side, it just depends on how you put this flight board on. But the flight board is going to sit inside here in the middle, and we're going to use those 14mm screws to go ahead and attach the ESC stack here into place, and then we can continue with the wiring, where we're going to connect the motors up to the ESC. And you don't want to over tighten these screws. If you do, you're just going to strip out the nylon threads inside there, and that's not what you want to do. So just need to get up there, just get it kind of snug and call it good. And then these wires are going to come in here, and they're going to come into the ESC and come around and solder from the inside. So we'll have to take off this flight board up here on the top, have to loosen these nylon nuts, get this out of the way, get the other thing tightened, get the ESC screwed down, and we'll be able to continue with the soldering of the ESCs. To show you a little bit how this wiring needs to be done, I went ahead and I put the carbon fiber pieces onto these side panels. And these side panels are going to screw down from the bottom up like this. Now this is, you don't want to actually put these on yet. I'm just showing you this so you can know how the wiring is going to go. The wiring, we want it to come inside right through here, and we're going to wrap it around and bring them and connect them up to these 3 pads right here, the first 3. This motor is going to connect to the first 3. This motor is going to connect to the other 3. And you don't have to put them in the order that they connect up. Is not really important. Just whatever makes the wiring look nice. But they're going to come up here and they're going to U-turn back around and connect from this side. And the reason for that is to keep the wiring out, or not outside the quadcopter. So if anything happens, hopefully those wires will be inside and a little bit more protected and not have any tendency to get ripped off or anything. So I'm going to pull this back off, and then I'm going to go ahead and solder these wires on around backward. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to tin these up with some solder, and then I'm going to re-tin the end of these wires and solder them on. And like I said, the order doesn't matter, just that they look nice. Here I have 2 of the motors soldered in place, and you want to make sure that they're staying down below this ledge here, because your flight board is going to sit up here like this, and you don't want those wires touching your flight board. If you haven't noticed, these spacers right here are rubber spacers, and so they have quite a bit of flex in them. And the idea behind that is if any motors or any vibrations coming from your motors, the vibrations will come up here, and then these rubber grommets or these rubber spacers will take away all those vibrations so they don't get up into your flight board, which is what you really want. And if you have these wires touching the flight board, well, you're just helping the vibrations get into the flight board. And the reason you don't want them in the flight board is there's gyros in here that are helping you fly, and you don't want them to get messed up by vibrations. So I'm going to get the other 2 motors wired in place, and like I said, just make sure that they're down below this little ledge so they're not touching your flight board. The next thing I'm going to install is this XT60 balance lead. This is also included. I pulled off the little nylon or the little rubber spacers like this, and I'm going to take these wires and bend the end of them up a little bit, and I'm going to see if I can run them into these holes from the bottom like this. Yes, okay, good. I'm going to run them in from the bottom like that, and that way it'll just be out of the way a little bit more. I'm just going to solder at the top of them, and it should be fine. And also, because they're doing it this way, you're going to have a less likely chance of unsoldering the capacitor and having to mess with it. Alright, that did a decent job. Now the better job you do here and the better connection you get, the less likely you're going to be of pulling this out in a crash or you know, by accident when you're trying to change your battery out. So that looks like it came out pretty well. The next thing we're going to work on is connecting the VTX and the camera. These cables are included, and they're already the correct connectors, which is the first time I've ever seen this. It's kind of nice. The camera connects up here in the front. There's the arrow. The arrow points up to the front, and that's where the camera connects. And it only has the 3 wires, the ground, positive, and video. Ground, positive, and video, yeah. And then here's the VTX wire. It plugs in right here by the arrow, plugs in right there, and then it plugs straight into the VTX. Now this VTX does not have smart audio, so the only way to change the channel on this is by using the little brown button here. So we're going to mount this with the screen up at the end. That way we can see it, and it'll be easy to change channels because the button will be right there. So once these wires are connected, oh, one more thing. If you happen to break these connectors off, they have solder pads down here on the bottom, and they're all labeled battery, ground, and camera, and your VTX one connects over here, battery, ground, and VTX. And by having the video camera run through the flyboard, it allows the flyboard to put a the OSD, the on-screen display, up onto the screen so you can see it inside your goggles. If you decide to run the 2 video wires directly together, you just won't have any OSD. So I'd recommend doing it this way like it's supposed to be. Anyway, so once this is back on, this where the capacitor is the back, and the arrow points to the front. This slides up here. You just want to make sure that it sits up here flush. If it doesn't and it kind of wobbles a little bit, then you probably have wires, or motor wires down here that are stacked up too high and you need to reroute them a little bit. So once you get this back on, the next thing to do is going to be try to get these side plates on and route the wires in around through these holes, the little gaps there, so that they can sit down on their flush. Alright, so I'm going to start working on that. With the VTX cable connected and the camera cable connected, the next thing that has to be done is to get your receiver soldered up to the board. Now, you need to have this bound already because, especially if you're using this XM Plus like I am for a Tyrannus, this is very small, and I'm going to bury it in between these two boards, between the ESC, 4-in-1 ESC, and the flight board. So on the bottom of here, you can see down here at the bottom, right there, it says PPM, S-Bus, 3.3 volts, 4.5 volts, and ground. So this XM Plus it can use the 4.5 volts and the ground, and we're going to hook it up to the S-Bus because that's what it uses. So if you have your own receiver, you just need to make sure that it's going to fit inside this frame. These little small ones are excellent because they don't take up a lot of room. If you're using an older one like an X4R SB, it came in a package like this big, and these are near impossible to find any room inside this frame to mount them. So you're going to have something small, or you're going to be mounting it up on top outside the frame with the VTX, which is not really ideal. But at this point, you need to get this bound to your transmitter and then soldered up with the wires up to the pads on the bottom of the flight board. For this receiver, I'm going to want it to sit down in this middle area by itself and hopefully be low enough not to touch this flight board. So in this case, I got these wires soldered on here, and I'm going to solder them on to the receiver here, and this will allow it just to lay flat underneath here. And also I'm going to have these wires, the antenna wires, coming out the back, and I'm going to route those down out the rear arms. Some people like to route them out the front arms, but the problem I've had with that is I tend to break the front arms more than I do the back. So I'm going to route these out across the back arms. But first you gotta get these things soldered on here, and this is going to be a little tricky because of the angle that I have it at. Right down underneath there, like that, on top of the ESC. So hopefully it fits in here. Got this little small piece of shrink wrap that I'm going to put over this, and I cut out a little bit for those wires, and then I'm going to shrink this on here, so that'll help it keep from shorting out on anything. And then I'm going to put a small piece of electrical tape over this end to keep the positive, the ground, and the S-Bus from shorting out on anything under the flight board, which doesn't look like there's much there, but just to be safe, I'm going to do it anyway. I shouldn't need too much just because there's nothing really to pull on it underneath there, and these wires are short enough. They're actually, the wires there are providing a little bit of support for the thing too, so it should be fine. So I'm just going to stick it in here where I kind of want it. Have some of those wires hold it in place, and there we go. Bob's your uncle. There, looks good. It's in there, and it's loose enough it shouldn't affect much with the flight characteristics of the gyro. And it's also buried in there, so it shouldn't have any problem like falling out or anything. So here are the antenna wires. I'm going to take one, run it down here, put a piece of electrical tape on it, one this way, call it good. This is a 5.5 box end wrench. I got this from somewhere. I don't even remember where I got it, but it makes putting these nylon spacers on here real easy. Just got to be careful not to twist them on too tight and strip them out. It's very easy with this wrench to do that. There we go. Alright, all three of those are in. All four of those are in. Now let's try to get these side plates on. Hopefully they will. Keep this routed back into the middle. Yeah, that one slipped in there just fine. Good. So on this one, we need to use the 6mm screws. They're the second to the shortest, and we're going to use these to go through the bottom plate right here in the front and into the aluminum, and that should hold these side plate pieces in place. Before we go closing up the frame, we want to take this little short cable here and connect it between these two front pieces here. It should just connect straight across. This far right one connects to the far right one of the top one, far left to the far left of the other one. So it should just slip in, and we're going to try to push this in here without breaking off the connector. because I don't want to tear it apart again. Alright, and then this top one will just slide right into the top, and alright, there it is. Now the only bad thing about having this here is that it's going to interfere a little bit with the camera and keep it from tilting quite as much as it could potentially. So I'm going to take these wires and try to push them down a little bit just to eliminate some of the space that those wires consume inside there. Good, that went in place pretty easily. Alright, so the camera has to have this, where the wires connect is actually the top of the camera. So we're going to put this into the side like this, and we got to use the included camera screws and attach this sucker in here. There, the camera is in place where it's supposed to be. Alright, now I intentionally didn't put this other side on because we have to put the side, not only the side on, but we also have to put this piece in between the two rear pieces, and we also need to attach this to the antenna holder. I'm going to have this coming off to the left side here a little bit, and hopefully that will help it line up for the VTX a little better. Not a whole bunch, just a little bit. There. About like that. That should be good. To attach this, you need to use the M14 screws, or the 14 screws, 14 millimeter long screws. This is going to be, there I have the one screw in. I had to pull these wires apart a little bit so this capacitor could push it down, and then this sits right up there on top of it just fine. Alright, now I need to get this other side in here, and then we'll put the small little top plates on and get this antenna wire routed correctly, and we're ready to move on. So let's see if I can get this on here. Oh yeah, there we go. It slipped on pretty easily. And it really helps if you have those wires routed correctly. They need to come down the sides so that they can clear this side piece. If you didn't route those correctly, you're going to have problems getting this on. Also, this needs to be inside, so take this back off. Great. Routed on the inside there. Now put this back on. Alright, I have the second side installed now. I have to put a screw in for this piece here for the antenna holder, and then we can start putting these little carbon fiber pieces up on top. Before I put this piece in place, I'm going to run a couple zip ties through it, and I'm going to run underneath the VTX, and that way the VTX will be able to zip tie straight down to this carbon fiber piece. A little skinny piece, it goes right across up here, and I believe this is really just for a little bit of frame support to keep the pieces from pushing together too easily. And we need another one of the longer screws to go through the side plate into the antenna holder. One thing to note about this frame, you don't have the ability to get a lot of low camera angle out of this. So if you're going to fly this, it's going to feel like it's going really fast, because as soon as you take off, you're going to want to put the horizon in the middle of the screen, and you are really going to feel like you're booking. But the reason for that is just because of the shape of these aluminum pieces out here. They just prevent the camera from going down too level. Here's what I was talking about. The camera can't really come down much. As I push it down, it gets stuck about right there because of the frame and because of the stuff in behind it there. So you'll be able to get a little bit of angle down, but it's mostly going to be up, probably, well, at least several degrees anyway. It's not going to be perfectly straight. So when you do try to take off and fly, it may seem a little fast, but that's just because your camera angle is up kind of high. Speaking of the camera, we need to put the other screw into this other side of the camera. These screws probably aren't long enough. Darn, I wish they would have been. You might have to get some longer screws. These are just like, they look like 2.5 millimeter or maybe even M2 screws. Here's one I happen to have here. Well, I found another screw. This is just a little M2.5 or M2. I'm not real positive which one it is. But hopefully the screws will work okay for you. This is a very long antenna for this quad. Anymore, I've been using little smaller ones. The little stubby antennas, like this. These things have worked pretty well for me so far. There's little stubbies. The problem with this one is that it has a lot of space around the outside of the SMA connector. But on this one here, it should be fine. But on other quads, I've had problems with that. But these stubbies have worked real well for racing. They're probably not much good for a long distance if you're trying to go a long ways. But for racing, they've been more than fine. It also came with this AK carbon fiber cutout. Now, I'm not really sure exactly what this is for, but you can use it to put on your motor to help hold your motor in place, I guess is what I've red. This is supposed to help you tighten up your lock nuts or get them loose if you need this. So, I don't know. I think this put it in because it's cool. That's probably about it. Alright, so now it looks like it's done. The next thing to do is to program this with Betaflight. And we're going to hook up the USB port into here and then do some configuration on this. And we're mostly just going to take the defaults because it'll probably fly just fine with the defaults without changing too much. But we do have to change stuff for the transmitter and the receiver. I still got to get these things attached onto there, onto the arms. So here's a quad fully assembled. I got the VTX zip tied down up here. The wire from the MMCX connector goes down, comes up through here. The VTX wires are pushed down underneath this little carbon fiber piece and back in behind the camera. So came out real nice. I got the one of the battery straps installed in here. It came with two, probably in case the one rips. Now the problem that you're gonna have on the bottom here is that this battery is supposed to ride right here. Well, in this case, it's riding right on top of these battery or the screws here, and they're just going to dent into your battery. And if you crash, all the way to the quad is going to be pushed down on those screws into your battery. So you have to have some kind of pad inside here or something. And here's a little soft foam pad I have, and this could go in here, and that'll protect the battery just fine. Or you could try to take the included battery protector here, and you could run it up on this side of the quad, take these two little pads off, and you could put the rubber piece on there, and then this could go between the quad and the battery, and that'd help protect the battery from getting hit by those screws. So I'm not real fond of this. They should have had some kind of little better design, but I'm not really sure what they could have done without redoing a lot of the frame. Alright, before I plug it in though, I'm going to do a couple of tests. I'm going to check for continuity between the positive and the negative on the battery connector right here, just to make sure that there's no shorts in it. If these two register okay, you're probably okay, but it's still really iffy about whether you got any shorts or not until you actually test it. But I'm going to take this voltmeter here. Alright, if it buzzes, it has shorts in it, so let's hope not. Nope, don't have any shorts. That's really good. Hopefully it's ready to be powered on. Actually, go ahead and try it. Here, try this. Here goes the battery. Should beep, hopefully no smoke. Oh, thank goodness. It works. And the VTX is on? Yeah, the VTX is on channel 1, A1. Awesome. Okay, so it's very easy to see this. Very easy to change channels. Hold this down. 2, 3, oh no, 1. Hey. Okay, anyway, we'll mess with that later. Anyway, the nice thing is it's right there, easy to get to. Alright, so we know it works. Good, that's good. Now I gotta do some programming in Betaflight, and it should be ready to take it for a first test flight.